Alright, so on this week's show, I'm going to try something a little different, and if I don't like it, or if it comes off as weird and inauthentic, then I'm going to stop, before I get too far into this podcast. I've been listening, I always listen back to the Decompression Chamber after I post it, and, the last episode, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to decompress and, make all these points about myself and stuff, but I feel like I've been on the defensive a lot on this show, and just in general, this show it's always one of two things. It's always either me talking about how great things are going and all these amazing plans I have, or how awesome my life is, or defending myself, or the way I've done something from either someone or I don't know, from the world at large. I always feel like this show is kind of self-aggrandizing, and the biggest accusation I get all the time, the biggest criticism people have of me is that I have a giant ego, or that I'm arrogant and stuff like that. And it's weird for me hearing those complaints, because I don't really think of that as a problem. And I explained this on a previous episode, on the Depression Chamber, how that ego is kind of what keeps me afloat and what helps me to get through. And I don't really understand how ego is a problem. It's I'm doing something I like and I'm enjoying myself, and where does it become bad for me? I understand how it can be bad for someone else, for the audience. I can understand how it could piss you off to listen to someone be so kind of smug and self-satisfied and enjoying themselves too much, maybe. Especially if you feel like you're not enjoying yourself in the same way. I get that. I get it as a reason not to like me, but as a criticism, as a constructive criticism, it's not helpful, because the ego is not damaging me at all. It's not hurting me. It's not hurting, what I'm doing. So I want to criticize myself on this episode. I don't know how well this is going to go. I'm not good at it. Not because I'm so egotistical that I can't see my flaws, but because, for me, when people talk about their problems, I don't know, there's always something weird about it. It always comes off as kind of fake and half-hearted. It's well, you obviously, I don't know how to fucking phrase this. I'm bad at even talking about the concept of talking bad about myself. It's these are thoughts that are kind of internal to me. It's if I talk about a problem I have with myself, then the question becomes, why am I not fixing it? If it's something I recognize as an issue, then either people are going to tell me how to fix it, or I already know how to fix it, but I'm not for some reason. And it's to me, those kind of things are things you internalize, because as soon as you admit it, you feel like you have to work on it or something. And maybe that's what I'm getting at here. Maybe I'm afraid to work on these issues, or I feel like it's wrong to brag about your problems, to be ha, I'm so shitty, It just comes off as well, dude, then fucking fix it, If it's such a big problem, then why the fuck are you complaining about it on the internet as opposed to fixing it? But at the same time, I don't necessarily feel that way when other people complain about themselves. I do sometimes, especially if people complain about themselves all the time. Then I'm just at some point, I just kind of think, well, if all you ever do is have this issue, why are you not putting everything you have into resolving this issue, Especially for people who have more issues than not. If your life is nothing but, self-criticism and constantly worrying about, how shit you are, then how is your entire focus not trying to fix those elements, But nonetheless, I have things about myself that I look at me and I think, God, I fucking hate you for that. I hate that you do that. And some of these things are not even things that I so much hate about myself because I enjoy doing them. I enjoy being shitty in some ways. I just know that it's bad of me or for me to do these things. So for instance, one that comes to mind immediately because I experience this all the time, especially on procrastinators, like either on the show or in the chat, which is that I am incredibly full of shit. I am just absolutely full of shit in like most arguments I get into. Because I don't have many convictions. I don't really like have a stance, like a concrete stance in the world that I'm like fighting for or arguing for. I will just argue whatever side of an issue is currently interesting to me, you know, or like if someone phrases something in a way that I find questionable, then I'll take the opposite stance, you know, just because I find what they said questionable, even if I don't even really care or I'm not really on that side. This comes up a lot when I argue with Nate, where I'm not really arguing with Nate because I disagree with him, but because I don't like how he's framed his argument, you know? And you'll hear this on procrastinators all the time, and it happens in the chat, where we'll get into these long arguments, and then at some point, he realizes that I don't actually disagree with like the overall point he's trying to make. I just hate how he's argued it, and therefore at that point it all just like the discussion breaks down, and it just becomes, why the fuck are we arguing, you know? Because I'll argue all day because I don't mind arguing, you know. I just want, I guess I have more of a problem with language than I do with ideas, you know? Like any idea can be presented in a way that I'll end up agreeing with it if you word it correctly, you know, if I understand where you're coming from, and I think that the way you've presented the idea makes sense, which is why, again, I have that Aberdolf Linkler mindset of just every idea makes sense to me. It's just a matter of putting it in the right terms. You know, there's very few arguments that I like really have a hardline stance on, like the idea that there is no objectivity in art. Like, that's one of the few things that I have always taken the same stance and will always argue the same way. But when it comes to social issues, political issues, just general discussions, especially discussions like about words and language, I'll just play whatever side of the field I find most entertaining to me at the moment, you know, and sort of derail things. So here's an example from today, where I was sort of pseudo-arguing with Mumkey in the PCP chat, because Mumkey's now officially a part of the PCP. And I think this was today. It was over the fact that everyone in the PCP has started showing interest in like making games in one form or another. Not literally everybody, but a bunch of members. Like a bunch of people have been talking about game ideas that they have going into 2017. And I was joking that 2017 is the year that we all start making games. And then Nate was talking about how, you know, he's made a game before and how it's incredibly difficult and all this stuff. And I was like, you know, well, the game I'm positing is you know, incredibly simple. Like, the whole idea of it is that it's simple. You play it with one button because it's not really a game. And like, or someone asked like, what's the gameplay? And I said, there is no gameplay. And Mumkey was like, it's not a fucking game then. And he came in with this argument about how it's like, you know, you've all heard the game, what is a game, what isn't a game debate. And like, I have no stake in it. I don't care either way. And the way I put it to Mumkey was like, I argued with him for a little bit, and I was literally arguing both angles at the same time. Like, I was simultaneously agreeing with him that it's not a game, but also disagreeing that the definition of a game should be so limiting. Because I'm so uninvested in it that I just want the argument to be presented in a sensical way. Like, to me, giving a shit about whether, like, what is considered a game is like completely retarded. Like, I think like even having that argument is like, I could not possibly care less about anything in the world, and I don't think anything matters less in the universe than like the label of what is or isn't a game. Who fucking cares? Because I'm very anti-labels in general. I hate that everything is so like sequestered into mediums and genres and stuff, when so much of the best stuff out there is stuff that breaks those conventions and is like stuff that is not easily classifiable into, you know, into categories like that. I just generally hate labels and categories. But at the same time, I do agree that it's not really a game. Like, by standard definitions of like what is a game, it shouldn't be called a game, the thing I'm talking about. So like, yeah, I see it both ways, and I can argue both ways, and I'm only arguing because I think it's funny, and I'm totally full of shit. So I'm like literally arguing both sides of the field against him, and he was just like, what? Like, he was just like, you know, like, fuck you, you're a fucking idiot. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, I know I'm being an idiot. Like, this happens all the time on PCP. Like, when I said something like, how do you even know that I'm trying to speak English in my videos, you know? Like, stuff like that, where, yeah, of course I'm speaking English in my videos, but I'm just like, I'm broadening it out to like such a philosophical level just to like win the argument. And for me, winning an argument doesn't mean proving I'm right. It just means like proving that being right doesn't matter. That neither that if you argue something hard enough, if you argue it to like a broad enough scale, then it's all meaningless. You know, that's like why I have such like a nihilistic mindset about everything, because you can kind of win every argument that way. Just like, it only matters if you care. And if you don't, if you bring the argument to a point where you make it apparent that you don't care, then it's all meaningless. It all just goes out the window. And that's the way I argue, because I have no convictions. I don't care about any side in any argument. I don't care about being right. I don't care about, like, you know, actually progressing the conversation. I just care about playing these little lingual games and, you know, and saying fuck it all and having any stance is lame. Like, that's kind of how I end up spiraling my conversations. Now, I enjoy doing it, so that's why it's a problem that, like, I don't know what the solution is, because I do think it makes me a total douchebag, and it makes me impossible to talk to. It's like, when you get to that point in the argument, you're just frustrated, and especially because, you know, it always makes me look like the winner, even if I'm not. Even if, like, you know, in any conventional sense of a debate, I'm just making an ass of myself. But there's never a sense of me, like, admitting that I've lost. You never get to a point where I'm like, okay, you've out-argued me, because all I do is take the argument to such an extreme and broad place that there's no way to win. It's just over. Like, all I've done is removed the game out from under you, you know? I've just made myself above it all. And even if you see me as, like, obviously wrong and just a dick, you know, it doesn't affect me. It never makes me feel like I lost or feel like the bad guy, you know? And that's why something like the Pokemon race, where, you know, the real drama is Ben versus Nate in that race, right? Like, Nate, they both tried. They tried really hard, and they had a sincere, you know, dedication. The reason that video is entertaining is because Nate tried so fucking hard that when he lost, it had a real gravitas to it. But no one likes competing against me because I won't take it seriously. Because if I did win, I would, of course, lord it over everyone. I would brag to the end of the earth, and I'd be like, I'm the greatest guy ever. But if I lose, it doesn't matter, because nothing matters, and I don't care about anything, and I have no stakes in anything, and and it's all meaningless. So, yeah, I guess it's kind of like Nate was talking about how one of his in the Pokemon Sun and Moon podcast, how he really hates the rival Hao, because every time you beat Hao, he just goes like, wow, that sure was a fun match, you know, like, we sure are buddy pals. And he's like, there's no sensation of victory from like beating someone like that. And that's me. That's who I am, is that guy who, when I lose, it's like, well, you know, playing games is for idiots. But when I win, it's, ha, fuck you, you lost. Yeah, I think it makes me a total douchebag, and, You know, it's a hard thing to call someone out on. So I think that's why I've never quite been, you know, people get frustrated with me in the moment and things like that. But it's hard to express the overall problem of like what is it that I'm doing that you can sense I'm being a dick, but you're not sure why. This is why. It's because I have this affectation that nothing matters to me, and it's just a defense mechanism. It's a way to make it so you never have to feel aggravated or a sense of loss. You know, I never feel like I've lost anything because I refuse to take anything seriously. But it also means that, you know, when I taste victory, it's only like, it's always backhanded. I mean, I always feel like a dick even when I win at something, just because, you know, I only celebrate victories that I was like bound to win anyways. So I don't know. Yeah, that's that point. I guess that was fun to talk about. I think I rambled and repeated myself a lot, but maybe you'll hear more about me talking about why I'm a total dick in this decompression chamber. Okay. Alright, I guess we'll mix this up a little. We'll jump back and forth between different types of stuff in this podcast. This time it's going to be more about a certain fear of mine. I don't know if I'll call this a character weakness, because it makes me sound like the good guy in this scenario, whereas the last one was just me being a dick. But it is sort of a weakness of character, I guess. You know, you often see this trope in media of the character who tries way too hard to be strong. Like someone who tries to take on the weight of everything on themselves and to never crack and to always look like, you know, to try to be the Rock, the person who never sheds a tear in front of anybody or shows any fear, you know, in front of their crew, so to speak, because they're trying to hold everyone else together, you know. And there's always this sort of this sense of almost fear that person is one day going to snap under the pressure, that they're not, that like all that strength and resolve, you know, they eventually, the hardships they're facing will eat away at them and it'll just break them, you know. And sometimes these characters are presented as heroes and as the strongest people. Sometimes they're the ones who you're the most concerned about. And usually, there's, you know, what holds these people together is that there's someone that they find that they can show their real insecurity to, that they can break down in front of. You know, I'm thinking, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of this, you know, it's not quite a perfect example because this character kind of flies off the handle, would be in Eureka 7 when you have, what's his name? You have Talho and the guy who, Holland, who, you know, both of them are sort of inauthentic around everyone else, but, you know, like, because Holland's always putting on this character of being this, like, larger than life figure, but when he's with Talho, he can emote and have those moments where he just kind of breaks down. And, you know, there's a lot of characters like that in media, and I'm always afraid that I might be one of those people. And I realize that because I'm comparing myself to a heroic trait, then this sounds like, you know, this sounds like egotistical self-aggrandizement. But I don't know that it's that the people around me are weak, or that I just perceive everyone as weak. You know, because I'm so egotistical, I feel like I'm supposed to be stronger, that I'm supposed to present myself as someone who is flippant and doesn't care and is unaffected and doesn't get emotional and never feels, you know, hardship, because everyone around me seems to be dealing with worse, you know, and I always feel like I have to be the one person who is not complaining, you know, the one person who is doing okay, so that everyone else feels comfortable, like we're not all on a sinking ship, someone steering it upward, and I want to look like that guy. I don't even know how much I do look like that guy, and I do know that, like, for the PCP, Nate has often said, for instance, that he sees me as sort of like, a beacon of hope that this group is going to do well, because I'm succeeding so much and I seem to be having such a good life that it's like, we can all do it, and I want that. I want to look that way. But there are lots of things that, that bother me, that go wrong, or that I just feel emotional. So there's oftentimes, several days in a row where I just feel like total dog shit and just don't even want to, deal with anything. And this decompression chamber is helpful for that, and that's kind of part of why it started, because, again, as I've said in previous episodes, the sort of incentive to have a show where it's just me is that there is none of the putting on airs that comes from talking to another person. There's none of the turning myself into someone else. And it's not that I'm always completely vulnerable to my audience, but and it's funny too, because I know that most of the people I'm talking about who I try to be strong in front of listen to this show anyways, so this is kind of an admittance to everyone, and those people probably, again, I don't think anyone sees themselves as relying on me, or possibly is relying on me. Maybe no one is. It's just how I feel like I have to be. And part of it, I would say this sort of mindset originated from my teen years, because of the fact that I am the eldest of 3 brothers. And my dad is exceedingly strong. He, like me, puts on that character of, like, everything will work out. And part of the reason for that is that my mom, while she is a very, tough person, she is comparatively, in terms of, like, emotion, she's very emotional. She will be worried, very intensely worried. She's very pessimistic. She's very, if things are going wrong, she expects them to go very wrong. And my dad has always been someone who's constantly reassuring her. He's always playing it's not that bad, it's gonna be okay, I know what I'm doing, I know how we can get out of this. My dad always has that optimistic mindset just to counterbalance my mom's pessimism. And when I reached a certain age, I realized that I too have to do that for my mom, because she will become concerned if me or Victor or Shade, if it seems like things aren't going well for us, or if we're concerned about something, it becomes almost a bigger concern for her than it ever was for me, So I won't talk about hardships with my mom, even though I know she wants me to. I know she would want me to, and she would want to help. But I feel like things that I can deal with that aren't that big a deal to me become a bigger deal, both for me and her, if I tell her, so I won't say anything. I'd rather come to my dad, who is, who will be able to deal with it, but even him, the problem with my dad is that there's just too many problems he has a difficulty understanding, and he has his, he's the type of person to, like, give advice and it kind of expect you to take that advice, even if, to me it's like, well, I know what I'm doing, I'm just here to vent. I don't know. I don't have an easy time venting to my parents. I've never been able to tell them about anything going, like, wrong with me. Not because they're not, they're totally there for me. I just personally would rather keep it to myself, because I don't feel like worrying them will help me more. I feel like I should deal with it, And then I've also got 2 little brothers who, I wanted to be a role model for, who I wanted to be strong for. So I, again, have always put on that face of, like, being a leader. I've always been the leader of my brothers. They've followed me through whatever I've been doing all these years, and we were always very close. They're always right behind me. And I've always been sort of a leader amongst, friends I have and stuff like that. I've always been someone who constantly reassures everyone. And unlike my dad, who does it with this sort of brazen, manly confidence. My dad's just like, you know, he's a man of the house kind of guy. He's the kind of guy who's like, you know, this is what we're going to do and it's going to work and we're going to do it. And he's very confident. I, on the other hand, approach everything in a much more sarcastic way where, to me, it's more about... My dad suggests, like, believe in me because I know what I'm doing and I will get it done. For me, it's more like, you're silly to be thinking of, like, this is a problem. Like, I constantly make people, like, I make people out to be overreacting anytime they're complaining about something. I always make it out like, of course things are gonna work out. You know, like, yeah, no shit. Everything's good. Everything always goes well. You know, if you just give it time, everything always goes well. Like, that's the way I present things, as if that's a given. And, like, I think Devu is the person who's called me out on this the most, because of the fact that I, like, you know, he is often, like, has problems with things that I'll just be like, that's, you know, if you just give it like 5 minutes, it'll work. And then, like, it doesn't work, and he's like, you always say that it's gonna work. You know, you're wrong like half the time. But, like, because I approach everything in this way that I'm just like, you know, everything always works, everything's good, the world makes sense, you know. That's just my way of reassuring people, like, trying to make them feel like nothing's ever that big a deal. Whatever thing you think is a big deal, it's actually not a big deal, and everything makes sense, and it's all gonna work, you know. That's just kind of my approach to life. And to bring that back a little bit to, like, you know, what I was initially talking about, just I feel like I constantly have, like, I'm constantly putting on this persona of, like, everything goes perfectly for me. Everything makes sense and flows in a logical manner. And, you know, I know that, like, Devu really likes, in spite of the fact that he calls me out on the way I approach, you know, the other thing, like, he's very much about the idea that, like, if you exude confidence, then the confidence will come. You know, like, if you're always thinking that you're doing things right, then you'll end up doing things right. And I kind of act the same way, but I have doubts about it, you know, like, things aren't always perfect for me. Things aren't always great. Things aren't always working out. Sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. You know, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, or I'm just angry or anxious or bored or, like, just upset about something, and I never feel like there's someone I can talk to about it, because if I do, then it breaks the charade. It breaks the image. It breaks the idea that, you know, that there is someone who's doing it all right, and that, like, you know, I sort of want to be this symbol of, like, what you're all hoping life can be. You're all hoping you can live your dreams and you can do art and make money and be happy, you know? And I don't want to suggest to you that even after all that effort and all that work, it's still gonna be shit, like, half the time, because you're just a fundamentally broken person who has, you know, problems with addiction, and you're not satisfied with your body, and you never leave the house, and you know, you never get laid at all for years on end, and, you know, and you sit around and drink alone, and sometimes stare into space all day, and the only sense of accomplishment that you ever feel is when you throw together random 10-minute vlogs, and you're so self-satisfied about your own content that you'll put something out, you know, every single day and feel like you're getting something done, when all of it is just, like, pennies in the ocean of actually accomplishing something, when you could be, if you put your mind to it, like, putting out, you know, like, more mainstream content that you know everybody wants and you know you could make, and it would make you more money, and it would help out you and all your people, and you'd be moving way faster towards anything you wanted. More money, better place, you know, getting all your fucking friends down here. But because you're so stuck in this mood-driven mindset where all you do is you just... I'm just talking about myself, by the way. I don't know why I'm still in the second person. But, like, maybe it was just easier to rant about that if I'm talking, if I pretend it's not me. But, you know, I'm so governed by moods. I'm so impulsive. I just want to do whatever is interesting to me right now. And I never want to do anything that's like takes setup or time or work or effort. You know, the reason I put out videos every day is not because I have an amazing work ethic. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. The reason I put out videos every day is because I just attach myself to every flight of fancy that I have, and I just want to do that. And that works decently for me because people do watch those videos and enjoy them, and that's great. But I could be, if I set my mind to it, making stuff that everyone would enjoy all the time. You know, I could be having a video every third day on the Digibro channel, you know, with 100,000 to 500,000 views, and that would be growing at such an exponential rate. If I had videos coming out that frequently of that level of quality, so many people would start tuning in that I'd have way more ad revenue, way more Patreon money. Devu would get a raise, Devu would have a car. You know, my friends would be able to, we'd all be fucking moved in somewhere, you know, and doing these things that we've been talking about, that we've been slowly making progress towards for years, but because none of us just buckles down and just does the fucking thing, you know, we all kind of like slowly get it done while we pussyfoot around and procrastinate and, you know, worry about other shit, that we haven't just buckled down and made the thing, because we're all flawed people who can't just do that. You know, none of us has the mindset to just become a purely engine of success. And I keep painting myself like one. I keep making it look like, hey, you know, someone's at least got their stuff together enough that they're still rising through the ranks. You know, I'm doing it, but I could be doing so much better. And, you know, and of course I agonize about it every day. Every day that I, you know, when I fucking spend a week, what the fuck have I done this week? I don't know. And I know it's because it's the holiday season, but this is why vacations freak me out and I shouldn't take them. Anytime I'm like, I'm just gonna not do work for a week, then at the end of that week, it doesn't matter what the reason is that I didn't do work for that week. It doesn't matter that I was hanging out with family, or that I was like trying to take a sabbatical, or that it's like, oh, we have enough work done. There's no reason to do more. Except that there's always a reason to do more, because if you do more, then more will come out of it. That's why Casey Neistat has the do more tattoo on his hand and the work harder tattoo on his arm, because he sees those and he goes, you're right, I should just work. It doesn't matter that I don't have to. You know, complacency will kill you. It killed him. He talks about that. You know, how there was a 2-year period where he didn't do shit because he had $2 million from selling his show to HBO, and it made his life miserable. It was the worst he felt because he wasn't working, you know? And every time I take a week off and I don't work and I look back at it, I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? Why I don't care about the fucking holidays. Why am I sitting around for 5 days drinking and fucking making vlogs about my dream anime? It's stuff that comes into my head like out of nowhere, and I make a vlog and then I feel satisfied. Well, I made a video today, so what does it matter? Yeah, I could be done with the next part of Shaft studies. You haven't even started on the next video yet. I could be done with it. I think I could be done with it. Yeah, I could be done with that if I'd been working on it this whole time since finishing writing Shinbo in the 2000s. You know, I could be started on the next thing. I could be using this last week of the year to write, you know, videos for all of January to have ready for Devu, so he has work, so he knows what he's doing, you know. So we don't start January with this whole clusterfuck of the goddamn plebe and the weeb, and then who knows what my channel ends up being for the rest of the month. Oh god. That was too much decompression. You unzipped me! Me? This might end up being a longer decompression chamber, because I'm still in the same night, and I'm already on a third recording, so, you know, I don't know how long this might go on for. But I want to expand a little bit on the idea of complacency, and also to share one of the pieces of advice I've gotten that stuck with me the most out of anything I've ever heard. You know, sometimes you have those things that someone says to you, or I mean, I don't know if you have this, but I've had a few of these instances where someone said something that like just has replayed in my mind forever. And this one by far the most so, just because it's remained true over all the years, which is that I was talking to Ghost Lightning once, my friend who I've often described as my mentor, fellow anime blogger who I visited for a time in the Philippines in 2011. And we were talking about probably some project I was trying to do, like some, you know, I was probably telling him about some idea I had that I wanted to get off the ground, but that I was like probably bitching about how I wasn't doing it. And honestly, sometimes I'm shocked by the level of patience that Ghost Lightning had with me, because it's a level of patience that I wouldn't have had, like that current me would not have for a like 18-year-old complaining about the things that I would complain about, you know, with a lack of self-awareness. But I'm sure I was bitching about something, and about how I was not in the mood to do it. And he like really hit me hard with his line. He was like, "You always let yourself be controlled by these moods, and like you need to stop that." Like, I don't remember exactly the phrasing, but the advice was to stop letting myself be controlled by my mood. And it was like mind-blowing to me, because I never thought about that's like a thing that you have to fight. Like that, like what it means, to me in many ways, what it means to be an adult, or to be like mature, and to be able to like handle your scandal, as the phrase goes, is the ability to work through what you don't feel like doing. You know, to do it anyways, even though you don't feel like it, because it's necessary, or it's the right thing to do, or it will, you know, benefit you. That to me is like, that's the entire definition of what it means to be like, you know, to be an adult who gets things done. Because, I mean, that's entirely what work is. You know, work is when you do a thing you don't want to do because you understand the long-term benefits of it, and you know, can make progress. And, you know, in the time since then, I mean, it was a while before, like, that advice, like, haunted me, but I did not beat that for a long time. You know, I did not get past that problem of having, you know, just letting my mood completely control me, because I would, if you know, I would only do things I was in the mood for, and like I would be in certain moods for days on end, or just like very rarely actually be in the mood to get something done. So, you know, it was a big problem that I would let myself be so controlled by whatever mood I was in. And I've learned how to beat that. I now know how to put, like, to override my mood and just fucking do something. And the funny thing about moods, easy to change. It's actually, like, you know, you can be in a mood, you can be in like a rut, you can be like, I'm bored and upset or something, and you can stay that way all day. But if you actually flip the switch in your mind where you realize, like, I can change this, then it's pretty easy to do. For me, it's often a matter of just throwing on the right music and, like, getting out of my chair. You know, I've had days where I'm, like, sitting there for hours just kind of, you know, ruminating on something negative and just being in a shit mood. And then, like, I realize I'm listening to depressing music and sitting in a chair and, you know, and eating cheese balls all day. And then, like, at some point I go, wait, let's stop this. And I just, like, throw on some Anamanaguchi and get up and, like, do some push-ups or go for a walk or go eat something, and I come back and I feel completely different. You know, you can do things to affect your mood, and oftentimes just working through it will make you feel better. Just like, for me, actually getting something done always feels good. It doesn't matter. Like, sometimes I get something done and I feel great, and then I immediately going back to feeling like shit as soon as I'm not working again. But like, working on something always feels good. It's always a pick-me-up, you know? I'm never sad when I'm doing a decompression chamber because I'm recording. You know, I'm having fun making a recording. So you know that at least an hour out of my week that I'm recording this podcast is a time I'm feeling pretty fine, you know? And sometimes the result of that can change how I felt from before, especially if I've just made something that's actually like really beneficial. Like anytime I write a Digibro video, I feel great afterwards, because it's like sometimes they come out of nowhere. It's you know, I feel like shit all day, and then suddenly I finally get an idea that I really want to do, and I do it, and it's like, this has made my whole month. Because, you know, I only really have to have a video every week, and even if I spend like 2 days completely agonizing over getting the video, like coming up with an idea that I want to do, and it's like, just sucks, those 2 days are grueling, and then I write that video on the 3rd day, then that weight is gone. It's like, oh, now I've saved the week, and the rest of the week is fine, and I don't feel that pressure anymore, you know? Like, accomplishing things and working can be so you know, can really get me out of those moods. And so I still am someone who lets myself be governed by moods a lot, but I know how to fight it. But the problem is that I face now is complacency. And I really do think that, like, when people talk about complacency, it sounds so phony, right? To hear someone who's like successful say that, like, that success can be a problem, but it really can, because hunger and like desire for more is such a huge motivating factor to, like, it really pumps you up and like makes you want to keep working. And again, working is the best feeling I have, you know, it's the thing I want to do the most. I feel lazy when I'm not working. I feel shitty when I'm not working. I feel like I'm not going anywhere, like my life is stagnating and nothing's really happening, you know? It's only when I'm accomplishing more than I have already done that I feel, you know, reignited, either in the form of making more money or feeling like I'm making creative progress, like I'm getting better, you know, those are the best feelings. But when you're complacent, it's when you realize that, yeah, you could be getting better, you could be making more money, but you don't have to. That's the danger that success can bring, is when you don't have to, so you think, well, it doesn't matter if I just do whatever I'm in the mood for. It doesn't matter if I spend all day, you know, being a shit, because I know by the end of the month I'll get those videos written, you know. At some point this month I've got to have a huge burst of creativity where I write 4 videos in a short span of time, and that's all I really need. You know, it's enough to make the money, to keep the channel growing, to keep me, but it's not progress, it's stagnation. And when these periods happen, when I have like times where I don't really care about what's going on, it tends to, even though the same amount of stuff is coming out, you know, I don't feel like it's getting better, and it's not necessarily, the money's not going up. You know, you can tell at times when I'm very passionate, when I'm like really getting things done, it seems like I make more money, even though there's no real logical reason for that to be the case. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just the way I look at the statistics depending on my mood. It just feels that way, you know? And it feels like I'm not getting anything done when I let myself be lazy. When I let myself go, you know, I already wrote the videos for this month, so rather than writing the ones for next month, or rather than writing something even bigger and better, rather than getting a new thing done and expanding on my creativity, I'm just gonna sit around, you know, because I can. Why not? But that's the thing. Sitting around makes you feel like garbage. Makes me feel like garbage. It makes me feel like nothing's happening. It makes me feel like I'm not doing anything, like I'm just stagnating, like I'm getting worse as a person, or remaining the same, you know? This is what happens to me with like diet and weight loss and quitting things. Like, the reason I keep going back to smoking, you know, I bought a pack of cigarettes yesterday just because I had I've like, what always happens is I think, why do I have to stop? Like, nothing is making me stop. the only reason to stop is this vague sense that I'll be better if I do it, you know? But there's no actual pressure to. There's no pressure to stop eating out so much. There's no pressure to eat better, to look better, to feel better, you know? Logically, I should just want those things. But because I'm already meeting my own demands for success, I don't feel like I have to do any of that. Well, who cares? Why do I need to look better? Why do I need to feel... But then at the end of the day, I'm sitting on my couch for hours at a time going like, I have no social life. I feel kind of sickly and fat, you know, I'm not eating well. I feel wrong. I feel imbalanced. My head hurts because I've been smoking too much, you know. And all of that is what puts me into the mindset of like, well, you know, I gotta numb this somehow. Let's either, you know, take a couple Advil or drink as many beers as I can, you know. And then drinking feels great, but then there's that moment when you're drunk and then you can't get anything done and you're like, well, now I'm useless, so I guess I'll just go to bed and then sleep for, you know, 12 hours every fucking day. Complacency is dangerous. And, you know, I think a lot of people view their vision of what success is like, you reach this level and then it's a plateau from then on of happiness. But there is none of that, because if you plateau, you become unhappy. The second you stop fighting is when you lose your drive to become better and to keep being good. It's when you kind of realize the bare minimum you have to do and you just decide to do that. And that's when you stagnate. And I'm not saying that this has all happened to me, because the only reason I feel any of this stagnation is that my life is so open-ended and I work so fast. That's the only reason this happens. Because if you look at like the content I'm putting out, you're like, well, wait, you're trying new things all the time. You've got like all these new series you keep opening up. You know, After Dark's always doing new things. You've got all these, you know, new things going on Digibro. Where's the stagnation? Well, the problem is that all that stuff only takes up a small part of my day. You know, the amount of time I spend working on these videos and stuff, that's like a few hours. The day is 24 hours long. Every day is a long day, you know? I sleep probably 10 to 12 hours of those, so like, you know, it's not as long, but the time that I'm not making these videos or consuming anime for these videos or like doing research is time I'm not doing anything. That's the stagnation time. I do not monopolize my time well, you know. And like Casey Neistat with his do more and work harder, if you watch that guy's video about his fucking schedule, he's never not doing something. Never. You know, he's always either working or making movies or spending time with his family or you know, traveling or doing whatever, and he works even when he travels, like on planes and stuff. He only sleeps like 4 hours a night. He's always, you know, he works out every day, he runs consistently, he's always happy, healthy, and working harder and getting better. All hours of day, you know? So even though, yes, I still work enough to innovate, I still do enough to make progress because I can work so fast and I get things done so quickly. Because I'm like a fucking engine, I'm just a machine that cranks out stuff. Nonetheless, there's a lot of every day that is just sitting around feeling wrong, you know? And that's the part of me that I have a problem with. That's harder to communicate to people. And it's harder to be like, to make people understand that like, being satisfied with my career does not mean that I'm satisfied with my life, because I know I could be doing more and doing better and not letting my mood control me, you know, fucking 10 hours out of the day. Well, it's been almost a month since I recorded the first 50 minutes that you just listened to of this podcast. I recorded it at the end of December, and I spent a lot of time really deliberating about whether or not I was going to release it, whether I was going to continue the episode. A big part of me just wanted to delete it, not let it see the light of day, because I feel so weird about talking about these things, and, listening to it back, I couldn't help but feel like somehow I came off as even more arrogant and self-aggrandizing when complaining about myself than I ever do when bragging about myself. It's quite incredible. But I ended up deciding I wanted to post this, particularly when I came up with this last section. I wanted to record this for the last, week or so. And I finally have time now that RadCon's fully over, and I've had a day to sleep and do stuff. So, I want to talk about the Hedgehog's Dilemma, as described in Neon Genesis Evangelion. Something that connected with me very strongly back when I watched the show, and which still does. Which is the idea that, when two hedgehogs try to get close to one another, they end up stabbing each other with their pins, and the closer they get, the more it hurts, and so they just try to avoid people altogether. I think this is generally true of human relationships. The closer you get to someone, the more it's going to hurt you. And I feel like the more aware of that you are, the scarier it becomes. I think most people are able to form relationships because they mostly see and focus on the good. Even though they might fight with someone or have problems with them, they really, internalize the idea that they love the person or they're close to them. And I try to do that as best I can. But I always have this sensation when it comes to, with other people, of I kind of, how about I put it this way? I feel the pins going into me, and I don't make any sound. I don't scream, I don't tell them that it hurts. I just let them get closer, and I feel the pain, and I don't say anything. I just eventually turn and go the other way. I just eventually leave, all at once. And, this is a big problem in my life in general, and one I'm trying to rectify. And that was an extreme example of me taking this kind of action. But let me break it down in a more simplistic way. I have some friends who, when you, let's say, get into a fight with them, or if there's something they disagree with you on fundamentally, some of my friends will just let it roll off of them. They might form a general opinion of you, like, if you repeatedly piss them off, then they generally think that guy pisses me off. But they don't think about the individual reasons why. I want to say that Nate is like this. He doesn't ever seem to bring up, hey, when you did this, that pissed me off. He can, if pressed, but he will more have a general idea of, you've pissed me off in this way a bunch of times, but not really focus on the specifics too much. Then I have friends who will get pissed off about very specific things and will let you know. They will tell you. They will hold it against you. Ben is a good example of this. You'll have heard it on the PCP. He will hold a grudge about specific things, and he will keep reminding you of that thing until you've done something to rectify it or to placate him. Now, I don't know how many other people are like this. I'm sure everyone is on some level, but this is generally how I operate. Is that I get mad about specific things, and I stay mad about them, but I don't say anything. I just bottle it all up. I just consume, because I don't want, to me, the best way to deal with it is to just let it go, right? If we keep arguing about it, we're just going to keep getting more heated. But at the same time, what I'm failing to realize is that, some things can actually be resolved. Sometimes an infraction can be talked through and reach a conclusion. And that's what I'm trying to do more of. I'm trying to, bring up when I have an issue. because I have this tendency to just sit back and accumulate all these different little incidents where someone's making me mad, and I don't tell them just how mad those incidents have made me. It just builds up and builds up, and I've got this list, and I'll tell other people, you know, I'll be like, I can't believe what this guy said to me today, you know, and tell them the story, but I don't bring it up to people's faces. And this is true of absolutely everyone. If you're listening to this and you're thinking he's talking about me, I am, because I'm talking about everyone I know. Anyone who does anything that makes me mad, I keep tally. I've got them all in my mind. And I've told other people about the things that you've done that made me mad. But I probably haven't told you. And you'll know if I have. Because, again, I'm trying to rectify this. I'm trying to become someone who lets you know, when I've got a problem, and tries to resolve it and tries to come to terms with it. Because I've been so bad at that in the past, and what I basically have done with some people in my life is just let all those little things accumulate until I just cut ties. You'll remember on a previous podcast I talked about my friend D. I just called him D. This was a guy who was a part of my circle of friends, and over time everyone developed a problem with him. Everyone I knew had an issue with D, because he would constantly do things that made everyone pissed off. It was just like a never-ending cycle. Every time we saw him, he would do something to make someone mad. And it got to a point where me and my friends would literally just sit around and shit-talk D all day. It was like the number one thing we did as a group, was to talk about how much this guy pissed us off. And the reason we did that is because D was the kind of person who you could not make realize his faults, and if you brought something up, if you made him realize that he'd offended you, he would apologize and he would try to do something for you. But I don't want that. I don't want people trying to do things for me. I just want you to recognize that you've done something wrong and then to not do it again. But D's not like that. He would do it again. He would never recognize what the mistake was. He would think he fucked up in that instance and try to rectify that instance without realizing that he's just doing the same mistake over and over again. Now, obviously, D is someone who, I'm probably better off without having him in my life. But so long went by that I just didn't even confront him. And I would just sit back and cowardly wait for someone to do it. I just wanted someone to finally snap on him and give me an excuse to ride that wave and just, have him out of my life. For a while, we thought it was going to be my mom, of all people, because, all my friends hung out at my house. And D had done enough things that pissed off even my parents, that my mom had straight up said, if he does one more thing that pisses me off, I'm kicking him out. And I literally hoped that it would happen. I spent days just thinking, God, I hope he fucking does something that pisses off my mom so she'll kick him out and I won't have to, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it myself. I'd rather just let these things wither away. I'd rather let people who I don't want to talk to anymore, I'd rather just ignore them until they go away. And eventually, D actually did piss off my brother Victor badly enough that he excised him from the group. He flew off the handle on D, and I just, I let it happen and I rode the wave and I just never talked to him again. I didn't even really make it clear that I also had a problem with him, but the fact that I never tried to contact him, I think he, got it. And the way it went down, it was kind of like he had done an infraction on our whole household. He'd been kicked out of the house, and I haven't spoken to him since. It's been 2.5 years. About 2 years, I guess. So, that's the way I deal with problems. Ignore them until they go away, until someone else deals with it, until, I can just burn the bridge, break the ties, or just they stop trying to contact me, This is how I've avoided a lot of people online. When there's a lot of people who I, was friends with for a little while, then decided I wasn't really getting anything out of the relationship, or that it was just annoying, or that I didn't want to participate anymore. So I just stopped talking to them, stopped responding to their messages. They'd message me here and there. I never respond. You know, I don't tell people, hey, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. I just let it go. But there are some relationships I do want to protect. There are some people, like everyone in the PCP, who, you know, I want us to continue to work together, to continue to be friends, to continue to have things to do. And so I think it's dangerous when, you know, if I get mad at someone like that, someone who I actually care about, and I just hold on to that anger and don't say anything and let it fester and build. Because what happens when you do that, when you don't confront the issue, is that it just builds on itself. Because there's been no resolution. So all I can do is think about that thing over and over again and just keep thinking, like, you know, and then if something like that happens again, then it just builds onto the pile. And I haven't let the person know that it bothers me. You know, I haven't told them, hey, you have to stop doing this, or else, you know, eventually, you know, it's gonna feel like the cons of knowing you outweigh the pros. And I have to let people know that, and I hope I can do that, you know. And I know it's like, it's kind of a selfish way of thinking in the first place, even, that like I'm the gatekeeper to our friendship. But I do feel like, you know, this is a horrible thing to say, but I feel like I treat relationships in the same way that I treat watching anime. That every episode that we go through together, I take stock of, is this worth continuing? You know, should I keep you know, interacting with this show, or should I drop it? And I feel the same way about people. Like, you know, if I feel like I'm net gaining from knowing you, from having a relationship with you, then I'll keep it going. And as soon as I start to feel like you're a drain on me, you're taking more energy than giving, then I just drop it. And I've dropped a lot of connections. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of unresponded to mail in my inboxes on every social media site. You know, there's lots of people who I just stopped talking to, and then that last mail they sent trying to reconnect came, and I just didn't bother responding. And you know, I've probably lost a lot of connections that are worthwhile that way. But it's just, I have such a hard time facing people, facing the issues I have, you know. And part of it is that I'm a harsh critic. You know, I am a harsh, mean person who will tell you exactly what I think is the problem, in no uncertain terms, you know, if I have to. If it comes down to it, and I'm going to tell you, like, what I think, it's going to be brutal and harsh, and there's a lot of people I don't think can take that. And I will say that one of the great things about the PCP members in particular is that we can all take it. You know, we harshly criticize each other all the time. We criticize each other right on the show sometimes. And there are some criticisms that some of us can't take and will get mad about. You know, there are certain things that I would avoid saying to certain members of the PCP. But if it was something that it came down to, like, this is a make or break for our friendship, you need to know I have this problem with you. What allows me to be friends with those people is that they can hear that and understand it. You know, and if they couldn't, then that would be the end. And that's what I really value out of people. To give an example of a case where that, you know, it wasn't that way, my ex-girlfriend, the whole time I was dating her, like 6 months, I had an endless litany of issues with her. You know, there were so many things she did that made me mad, that made me think, I want this over. But I would never bring any of them up because I didn't think she could take it. Because her mindset would not have been to hear those things and to say, okay, I'll try to, you know, to change, or I'll try to make this work. Instead, what she would have said is, well, I guess I'm just a terrible person, and, you know, I guess you hate me, and I guess we should break up. And I didn't want to break up, in spite of all those issues, you know. But when we finally did break up, then it was like, well, you know, all I had to think about was all the problems. You know, she is another person who later tried to contact me, and I just ignored it. I just didn't respond. I didn't, you know, I just said, well, I've already excised you from my life, you are already gone to me, you know? So, you know, I really want to cherish the connections I have with people who can take it, who can, you know, hear that they've done something that makes me mad, and then think, you know, to weigh the consequences, to say, how much do I value my friendship with Digi? And if the answer is enough to change something, or to rectify this problem, then, you know, then to go through with it. And I hope that I can change for other people too, you know. Again, I'm a very selfish person. I do view these in a very one-sided lens. It's like, if you make me mad, then it's over. If I make you mad, then you know, I don't know how you'll take it. I don't know if there's people who, like, I've never had the sense that I've ever pissed anyone off enough that they stopped being my friend. And that's what makes me wonder if I'm just like a shit person, you know, for thinking and acting this way. Because I don't know anyone who's done this to me. I've never had anyone just stop talking to me, seemingly out of frustration with me. I've never had anyone, at least not in my adult life, maybe in high school, but even then I can't really remember. You know, I can't remember a time when someone was just like ignoring me, clearly out of the fact that they, you know, didn't want to talk to me anymore. I don't even know if people interpret me ignoring them that way. I'm sure some have. I'm sure to some people it's been very clear, you know. But, you know, I feel like I'm just an asshole, and that I look at people in a different and perhaps wrong way. And I kind of resent myself for it. This whole fucking podcast has been very heavy for me. I don't feel like these things would probably be as heavy to other people, because a lot of this probably sounds like either relatable or, you know, maybe it doesn't sound like a big issue to someone else because you're not experiencing these things. They might just sound interesting. You know, like, I doubt anyone heard what I just said and thought, wow, you're a monster. They probably thought, huh, what a different way of looking at the world. Or actually, that's exactly how I think. But for me, it's like, you know, I'm literally describing to you things that I absolutely hate about myself. That's what this whole podcast has been. You know, drudging up the elements of me that I most hate and explaining them. I really hate that I have such a tendency to just abandon people, to leave people at the wayside, to not talk about my problems, to hole up in my, you know, in my room, in my space. You know, that's what I do when I don't want to face a problem. I just sit in my room. You know, I don't leave. When I don't want to, like, go out into the world, when I don't want to speak to someone, I just become a hermit. And that's what I always return to. I feel like I've been in this state for much of my life. I feel like I've been retreating from society for most of my life. Hiding. You know, hiding in this safe, cozy room surrounded by all this cutesy imagery and cute anime girls trying to, like, pacify and distract me, trying to give me something to look at other than myself and the world outside and all the things that I fear, you know. And this isn't even getting into my broad paranoias. You know, these are problems I have just with myself that are very specific, but on a more broad scale, I'm also extremely paranoid about everything. And I hate that about myself too, but it's in so many different forms. Like, I have an utter paranoia that everyone in the world is constantly judging me or wants me dead, or that society is ultimately going to side against me at some point. You know, I have, I guess, sort of a persecution complex. Like, I've spent a lot of time thinking about, like, how I would explain myself in like court or to a police officer for any number of reasons involving society changing. Like, I always feel like, you know, one day I'm gonna be the main character in 1984 or something, you know, like the person who has broken society's rules in such a way that I'm going to have to stand trial, and that in spite of my perfect logic and arguments, the system will fail me. You know, I'm always afraid that everyone's out to get me, that nothing's really on my side. And, you know, I have a really hard time talking to people about my problems, talking to people about what's stressing me out, you know. At the very least, you know, it's nice to have friends I can bitch and complain to, and at least I have had that. I've pretty much always had, you know, someone around that I can just talk to in isolation and complain about things, you know. I'm glad I've got friends living with me, you know, like Ben and Devu, and my brother Victor, who I can talk to and, like, share some of this stress, and they can go, yeah, I get why that's a problem, you know. But at the same time, living with other people, you know, is exactly what causes these stresses. And there's parts of me that's constantly going like, should I just fucking run away and be by myself? Would I be happier by myself, or by forging new connections, or by embracing the ones I have more? You know, we just did RadCon 2, and from the outside, RadCon 2 probably looks like a big party where we all just have fun and make stuff. But RadCon is incredibly stressful. It's just a powder keg of stress and fucking, you know, intensity. And everyone was feeling it, I think. I mean, the amount of times that we were all just standing around going, oh, God, I want to die. I wish I was dead. You know, I mean, we joke about those kind of things all the time whenever we're stressed out, but, like, we always mean it. You know, when someone is standing around saying, I want to die, even as a joke, it means they're stressed out. It means that they do want to die on some level, you know? I don't think that phrase is ever completely a joke. I don't think anyone ever says the phrase, I want to die, and doesn't mean it on some level. And we were just standing around parroting it back and forth at each other for days. Because what RadCon is not just hanging out with your friends. It's living with 9 extreme personalities who all have their own ways of living, their own desires, and are thrust into an ultimately uncomfortable situation of living in a house with a bunch of other guys for fucking a week, you know? Sleeping in the open, on couches, you know, 5 people in one room. And I don't even have a lot of that problem. I slept, you know, in my room by myself a lot of the time. But I had to organize all of it. I have to drive everyone around, you know, figure out what everyone is eating, what everyone can afford. You know, everyone's got different levels of income, different interests, different, you know, ways of life. And we've got one car, or 2 cars, me and Victor's, you know, and different sleep schedules. You know, I want to be up all night. Ben is always up all night. Nate wakes up early. You know, we're just trying to force all these people who live very different lives to live enough of the same life for a week to get a bunch of stuff done. And I've said this before, that the best possible future for the PCP is for us all to live in the same area, not in the same house. Because living with other people is kind of a nightmare. You know, every little difference between your lifestyles is monumental. And sometimes it's not that big a deal, you know? Like, me and Ben live on opposite sides of the house, and we rarely interact because Ben almost never wants to go out for any reason. He doesn't want to, you know, he stays in his room. He doesn't want to do anything, so that's fine. But like Devu, he needs food all the time. Devu just goes through tons of fresh food. So, you know, I end up driving him around, and we'll go to like the store or something. We'll drag Ben along sometimes. And it's just like, that little tiny incongruence in our lifestyles, that I only need to grocery shop every 2 weeks or so, but he needs to every like 5 days to a week, is a problem, you know, because it means that either I have to get in my car when I don't want to and drive him to the grocery store, or he has to go a few days without food, you know, waiting for me to be willing to take him. It's such a small thing, but it causes stress for both of us, you know. And Devu tells me I need groceries, and I'm thinking about that in the back of my mind while I'm trying to get all this other stuff done, and he's, you know, sitting around hungry for a couple extra days. Living with other people is just a nonstop source of issues unless you're trying to live together. You know, you're trying to do one thing. Like when you get married and you have a family, then it's like you are unified in your goals. You are trying to mold your lives around one another. But I'm not trying to do that with the PCP. I want to work with them. I don't want to live with them or like them, you know? And when you put us all in one place together like that, then it's not just us working together. It's us living together. And it is stressful. You know, it's not like we got into a bunch of big fights. I mean, we did get into some pretty heated arguments, you know. Those of you who've listened to the Ape Escape video will hear a part where, like, me and Devu get into an argument and I straight up leave the room because I was so heated, you know. Sometimes stuff like that happens. It's kind of just a powder keg. It's a bunch of heated personalities, you know. And it was even more stressful because the only way to make RadCon happen was to base it around work, you know. And like, I've talked a lot about how I love working and I love working with these guys, but man, I would much rather if we had just spent a week hanging out. You know, if it was just a week of us hanging out, not having cameras, not working on stuff, that would have been great. But we couldn't have afforded that. We could not afford, you know, 4 months after the previous RadCon to have everyone pay for flights again to come down here and do this thing for a week. You know, what made us able to do it was the Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter needed a product. We can't just run a Kickstarter for us hanging out. I don't think that would work out. Maybe I should have tried. But it's such a shame, you know. It's a shame we didn't just hang out. It's a shame we put ourselves into an even more stressful situation where we had to get certain videos done on certain days. Videos that involved watching stuff with each other, you know. And so many people had so many projects they wanted to get done, and everyone wanted to be a part of everything. So you've got, you know, what should be like 2-person Let's Plays that are just fun and relaxing turn into 9-person chaotic nightmares where everyone's screaming over each other. You know, it's just not a good way to live. You should not live with 8 other extreme personalities and little resources, you know, with everyone living in the same space and not having enough cars to go around. And it really made me, like, you know, realize, like, yeah, the ideal way to live would be all of us in the same area, but I do not want to live with these guys. I don't want us to all share a roof. I don't want it, and the problem is that that's the only reason that we're doing that with me and Ben and Devu is just simply that we can't afford it. You know, we don't have the money to all live in the same area. If we did, we'd just be doing that. You know, the only reason we all live in this house is that we were able to split the rent extremely cheap. And, you know, Ben would not be able to afford his own place. Definitely not. Devu could probably not. You know, I don't pay him enough. I don't make enough to pay him enough. And really, the only reason I can't afford my own place is because I pay Devu. Like, I would have enough money to get my own place, but because I hire him, because I want to have him employed by me, you know, I am putting myself in a position where I have to split rent and have to live with him and Ben. So, you know, it's a very weird position to be in. And I just want us to be as fast as possible. I want us to be in a situation where we can all have our own places and we can live near each other and just, you know, work together and hang out. Because those are the things that friends and business partners should do. You should work together and you should hang out. Those are fun things. Hanging out is fun. You know, I had a lot more fun in the later half of RadCon when it was just Jesse here, because even though I love all those guys, you know, I would love to hang out with Hippo every other day. You know, he's so much fun to hang out with. I love hanging out with Nate. You know, I love hanging out with Munchie. He was super fun. I had never really had a chance to hang out with Munchie until now, and he was really, you know, he was great to have around. But having him around along with everyone else was hellish, you know. And I'd love it if we all just kind of lived in a space, in one city, you know, and I could go, hey, let's go to lunch on Monday, you know, and catch up and hang out and have a good time. Hey, let's go play a video game. We don't even have to record it if we don't want to, you know. When we were when Jesse was the only one left, we spent a lot of time playing video games. Me and him and Ben spent one whole night recording Let's Plays. It was really fun. And then we did a bunch with Victor. We were playing through all the Tony Hawk games, and Jesse was getting really stressed out about the fact that, like, you know, he's trying to beat these games, but he keeps failing at certain challenges and just getting mad and being like, I just want to rush through this game, because of the fact that we didn't have enough to talk about to keep the podcast interesting, you know, because we were recording it, so there was this kind of need to be entertaining. And Jesse feels that even more strongly than I do. Like, I was perfectly willing to just, like, kick back and relax and let it be like a goofy video that wasn't really meant to be something all that serious, but I've noticed watching Jesse that when you turn a camera on him, he transforms. You know, Jesse cannot stand not being an entertainer when there's something recording. At least that's how it seems to me. So, you know, I could see him getting stressed out, and on some level I was like, I just want to watch you play Tony Hawk. You know, I don't care about the Let's Play. I don't care about this whole conceit that we have to be, you know, working on something. I'm just enjoying sitting here reading comics and watching Jesse play Tony Hawk. And I'd love to be able to do that, and for that not to require a $7,000 Kickstarter and living in the same house. And, you know, if I'm hungry, I better take Jesse because we're you know, he's not going to be able to eat otherwise. But then he's, you know, like, does he want to? He has to eat it whenever I'm hungry, you know, because he's kind of stuck with me. You know, that's... I guess most people probably know about these things. I mean, I had a lot of issues living with my family, you know, and living with Ben and Devu has ultimately been less stressful than living with my family was on some levels. Because while I didn't have to worry about them too much, you know, my parents, there was one of the biggest stresses in our lives was that we all ate dinner together. And I'm not even sure why we did it for so long. I guess just because Shade was still growing up and we all just felt like, you know, like it was something we had to connect with as a family or something. But just for the longest time, and also because I was cheap and Victor was poor, so like the idea that we got a free meal every day was definitely a plus. But the most stressful thing in our family is that none of us have the same taste. You know, my mom's a vegetarian. My dad quit red meat at some point. Now he's a vegan. They're both vegan now that they live together alone. You know, and me, Victor, and Shade all have different tastes. We're all picky, and we would like just spend like almost an hour like every day trying to figure out what to make for dinner, like arguing about what to make or deciding, and like none of us could really cook well, and everything we made turned out kind of mediocre. And it was just like, and we'd go to the grocery store and argue so much about like what we were gonna get, and it was just this huge amount of stress that's only caused by the fact that we live together and have decided to do this thing together. And as soon as I started buying my own groceries, that all went away. That whole thing went away. That huge source of stress went away. You know, and like the stresses I have now living with Ben, Devu, Victor, and Shade are comparatively minor. But I still can't help but think, man, if we each had our own place, it would be such a weight off of our shoulders, you know? Like, I feel like Devu would really thrive on his own, you know, and he's, like, because he has a huge problem with the cleanliness of the house. Me and Ben are fucking slobs, you know? We don't do anything. And I could tell it really bothers Devu, and he doesn't want to have to be the only person cleaning, because it sucks, you know, because he's the only person who cares, so obviously we're not going to do it because we don't care. But it sucks for him, because why should he have to do it all, just because we're slobs, you know? So, like, I would love for him to be able to have his own place. I think he'd be happier that way, you know? and I'd be happier. We'd all be happier. And so we've all been talking about this whole idea of where are we all going to move? Like, where are we going to go? Are we still going to have a place together? Are we all going to move into separate houses in some other town? Because there's no reason to stay in Virginia Beach. This place is kind of blows. And as we've been talking about it, I've kind of come to the realization, like, I don't know how much I care about whether we all, you know, live in the same place, in the same house, you know, like, I would prefer we had our own places as soon as possible. And I know not everybody can afford it, but at the same time, the level of compromise that we have to go through to be in the same place, like, you know, the two main cities we've been looking at moving to are Austin and Portland. And I personally would love to go to Austin because it has a lot more to offer me personally. It's a much more music-centric city, and I'm a big music guy. It's got lots of events, you know. And Portland is fun and cool, and it has those things. It has music, it has events, but it's just not quite the same level. And Austin just seems more attractive to me overall. But, like, if we are sharing a place, then it's kind of everyone's decision. You know, if me and Ben and Devu have to share a room or whatever, or whoever else we bring, you know, Ben would rather go to Portland, and some of the other PCP guys would rather go to Portland. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, am I going to keep compromising in order to have us all, you know, live together? Or should I just go fucking live in Austin by myself? You know, I could do that if I wanted to. And I don't know. I don't know the answer yet. But I know that there is one clear solution that will make all of these problems go away. And that's making a lot more money. If we all made a lot more money, none of this would be an issue. You know, if each of us could afford our own place in the same city, done. There's no problem. There's no issue, you know. If I could afford to both live by myself and pay Devu enough that he could live by himself, no issue. So that's where I'm going after this. You know, this whole podcast has been mired in what are my current issues, and the solution to a lot of my problems, to the problem of stagnation, to the problem of complacency that I talked about earlier, to the problem of not wanting to live with other people, but, you know, still wanting to maintain relationships with those people, you know, with the least strain possible. The problems, all the problems I've talked about, if I just make a lot more money, those problems go away. Whoever said money can't buy happiness is a fucking idiot. Peace out.